What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG. All the news, none of the BS. If you get a chance, check me out on Spotify and iTunes. ACG, the best gaming podcast, where video game news like this is discussed, as well as my reviews are put up there for anybody who wants spoiler-free audio. Let's begin with today's video gaming news. Ratchet and Clank, A Rift Apart. We finally get a PS5 release date for this thing. Ratchet and Clank, A Rift Apart is going to be that brand new full-length adventure. Dr. Nefarious is using a device that he can access alternate dimensions with and finally find one that he actually wins. Ratchet and Clank are then going to be separated, and as you try to reunite, you run around helping the Resistance, you explore new and of course familiar locations, and you wield a whole new arsenal of items, including the ability to use those items to solve puzzles and take out enemies. And you might think that sounds a lot like the normal games. Well, with the PS5 title finally actually being created for this hardware, you get to do a little something different. As you're playing against the various enemies and moving across the worlds, you get to use the Rift Tether. This is a device that allows for you to jump between worlds almost instantly using that device, which lets you jump anywhere you've gone in the game prior. It also is going to have 4K native support at 30 FPS per second and has a performance mode for up to 60 frames per second with a lower resolution. This game will support HDR, and if you have seen any videos of this game, this is a primo example of why HDR is so important. The last couple of months has actually been up in the air on this title, and especially its release date. I just talked about this in a podcast where I didn't know if they had actually decided to delay it a little bit, but then I wake up and today we find out PlayStation 5, June 11th is the release date. You'll be able to pre-order now if you want. This game looks phenomenal, and it is probably one of the leading titles that I personally actually want when it comes to the PS5. Another title that I want, and well, actually have, that I want to discuss today is Persona 5 Strikers. This is a Dynasty Warrior style game with all the trappings of a Persona title, including the cranked out graffiti color of the prior games, and of course, a talking cat you can take control of mixed with Dynasty Warriors. Now, not everyone likes Dynasty Warriors and not everyone likes Persona games, but the idea that this is basically considered a full canon title in the series of Persona and is getting very good reviews across the board. Now, as you guys know, we won't be using anything that has to do with Metacritic. Metacritic is weighted towards particular entities that review titles, and to be honest, is never really that accurate. It's a pretty shit site, but you can go to OpenCritic. It has the games, the same games that Metacritic does, but it is not weighted, meaning it's 100% accurate when it comes to the reflection of who said what, when, and where. It also covers reviews that are not scored in your traditional manner. For example, word scores like myself or others. Now, OpenCritic has the game as a strong rating. It's got 80 plus critic average and 88% of critics actually recommending the title. Most importantly, though, Happy Console Gamer, the husband and wife team of Johnny and Kim, loved what they played, but they do feel that playing Persona 5 is actually required for this game, or at the very least, the best bet. They really did enjoy that. Now, as you guys know me, I don't like to sit here and read other people's reviews. I've seen websites where they're like, hey man, let's do a 10-minute video on other people's reviews. Let's review the reviewers. But I am going to talk about a couple people that I actually pretty much trust what they say, at least when it comes to what they thought of the game, even if it doesn't agree with my own. The first is James Davenport, PC Gamer. He actually only gave this game a 63 out of 100 and says Strikers walks and talks like Persona 5, but no social game and bland combat makes it strictly for Giga fans, which you can just figure out what that means on your own. And then Brian Shea from Game Informer gave it an 8.5 out of 10 and said, while Persona 5 Strikers disappointingly removes the mainline story social links, it carries over enough familiar elements to feel like a true successor. What's interesting about both of those is they do indicate the one particular part that everybody has noticed, the lack of the social parts of the game. I myself have played a ton of hours of this, and I can definitely say that is missed. This is a Dynasty Warriors game, though, and I'm not 100% sure it would have fit, especially because as I've been playing this, I can certainly feel that this title would feel a little bit filled up and maybe a bit filler-filled if they actually put that in there. I get why they didn't, and I can see why people dislike that. I'm not 100% sure it would have worked had they been included. The game looks awesome. I've played it. I'm enjoying it. And while over the top and not without its problems, I have been having a good time. Stay tuned for my coverage. Persona 5 Strikers, it comes out later this month. But let's talk about something a little bit nearer and dear to my heart. HBO. Just kidding. But I did grow up on HBO and the late night shows that showed a little bit of skin. I always thought HBO was like the very cool kid of the late night cable TV shows or cable programs. And today we found out even more so because Pedro Pascal has been announced as the lead in The Last of Us for the HBO production. He's a phenomenal actor, whether playing a bad guy or a good guy or sort of a bad guy that does a lot of good guy stuff, which seems like this is a match made in heaven for The Last of Us. Pedro's work can be seen in Narcos for Netflix, phenomenal show, Kingsman, Wonder Woman 1984, Game of Thrones, and he, of course, is in the super successful Mandalorian. His involvement was announced shortly after Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones was also announced to star as Ellie. I think this is a really good mashup of two different people coming together to play these characters. It's going to be phenomenal to see what HBO can bring to a game that is actually becoming a TV show. These aren't necessarily super successful until we started to look at Witcher. So this is a time where I think that these water cooler moments are finally going to start happening. I cannot tell you how excited I am. That guy is awesome. The Last of Us 1, as we all know, a classic. Last of Us 2 sold more than 4 million copies within the first 3 days of its release. It's gone on to be like the third highest grossing game for PlayStation. So obviously a TV show makes perfect sense. I think for a lot of gamers, the intrinsic depth of those characters, the unique story that drives them, and Pedro adding a weight to Joel with his profoundly nuanced acting is going to be an awesome mix. I wasn't a huge fan of the Last of Us games, I'll just be brutally honest, but a TV show based on it, I think that allows for far more exploration. HBO also, they've never shied away from controversy, and the idea of a Last of Us on that channel means it's probably the perfect fit for a show about a good guy who's as bad as they come and the people that are impacted by those decisions around him. Speaking of bad guys, let's move on and discuss Warner Brothers. The shit tier bad guys. So, Warner Brothers, after many years, has finally succeeded and patented the Nemesis system from its Mordor series of games. If that's not irony for you, I don't know what it is. With the original real Shadow of Mordor games, there was introduced this Nemesis system, an antagonist AI system. This allowed for the foes that the player had engaged with to fight and retreat and return to fight again, but somewhat like the player themselves, when they go off and upgrade, they would experience changes to their abilities. And the farther and longer you stayed away from somebody you had fought and not beat, the stronger they would get. One of the strengths to this title was, at least for a lot of people, it added to that idea of a narrative going on outside of the direct control of the player. For example, you might fight somebody, they might light on fire during a previous battle, and if they return, they might have a weakness to fire or a fear of it. The Nemesis system also handled all the back end of the enemy's AI tribal system with the orcs, for different ones, actually raising and lowering the orcs in their own ranks, sometimes regardless of what a player did, and it would always show you and inform you on a separate screen what was going on. Now, if the Nemesis system was created to reflect gaming publishers, yes, Warner Brothers would be in just all the positions of all the clans. This absolutely sucks. As the years have passed, Warner Brothers has tried many times to patent this system, and they have failed. Here, though, they finally succeeded in getting a multi-year patent on the Nemesis system itself. And while we have seen some attempts at systems like this included in the Codemasters titles, like Grid that I reviewed, and its weird AI system, which really just allowed for the enemy racers to smash into you as hard as shit and not get penalized, we also saw it in some other racing F1 games, or the somewhat connected, though I would say not as robust systems in the latest Assassin's Creed titles. This doesn't bode well for gamers, designers, or pretty much anybody. I've spent more than a dozen hours looking into the patent, and while generically worded, it could be something that many devs just do not want to try to make something and then defend against it with their own title, foregoing the system and the more active enemy makeup for their own games, which really does suck. That is going to reduce that lived-in feeling. While the Nemesis system has untold issues and errors with a lot of nonsensical decisions that sometimes left me wondering how a headless orc that I had killed returned from the dead and was now weak to fire, though I'd never actually engaged in them with fire in any way, shape, or form, it still is a sad day for gamers. This is a system that we don't want patented. You don't want companies looking at these things and saying, guess what? Gaming is not art. Gaming is just a series of systems, and we're going to patent this son of a bitch. I will point out that I think this means far less when it comes to the patenting and the prior games as it does for the indication that Warner Brothers wants to move this into the future. This isn't the first time that odd parts of games have been patented. Namco, Microsoft, and others, including Sony, have patented parts of games before, but they've rarely actually proceeded to go out and actually take action against somebody. We can only hope WB decides to do the same. However, when you look at this, I think we can expect to see only on WB as an actual sort of platform when it comes to a lot of games. For example, the Hogwarts game, only on WB with the nemesis system. In a next Batman game or a superhero game, only with the nemesis system. Platforms are usually hardware specific or usually in some way truly service specific. This is going to be a situation where technically Warner Brothers has now made the mechanic itself be a platform, and that's unfortunate. Speaking of unfortunate, let's move on to Cyberpunk. They got punked, they got hacked. The news is always bad. No matter what happens, CD Projekt Red has always had issues. They released a shoddy game, they doubled down on it with a weird handling of the PR, and then apologized, and then got back to work and sort of got quiet for a second. And then recently, they got hacked, and today, more news is coming out about how deep that hack goes and what it involves. Nevertheless, earlier, we found out that CD Projekt Red had been hacked and ransomed for their data. Now, ignoring that hackers write their ransom notes like a 12-year-old who snorted 13 pounds of tart and tinies and then watched Swordfish at 4 times the speed, the hack was real, and CD Projekt Red stated, hey man, we have no plans to negotiate with terrorists. So the terrorists said, hey man, we have no plans of not following through with our crap, and they leaked some of the data. We found out that the source code for Gwent is for sure included. They're now threatening to release the Cyberpunk 2077 and Witcher 3 source code in auctions as well. They're currently auctioning these off somewhere in the dark web for $1 million or $7 million if you want to forego the auction completely. Now, one thing that a lot of people ask is what source code actually means. Source code is not the same thing as the game files or structure or the executable of a file that you may get if you buy a game on Steam. These files are driven by the source code underneath them and are created by them. The source code is not in any game you actually get. There's very few that actually release their source code. Think of source code like a dictionary allowing you to make a sentence or me to explain this to you, and the dictionary doesn't get shipped with this, only the video and the end words do. Source code means that all the ways in which a game is made are laid bare. Everything about the game. They can be parsed, which leaks and creates all manner of hacker, malware, and other things that you have to be worried about when it comes to your title. And of course, game development teams do have their own tools and tricks for what they want to do, how they want to do it, and you don't want everybody to get that. All in all, CD Projekt Red has had a bad year and a half, and at least for now, much of that doesn't look like it's going to actually go away or get better. Couple that with the report that mods were allowing for people to run nefarious code on people's computers. This has been patched. And all manner of other issues. It's been a pretty crap couple months for CD Projekt Red. Some of it because of, well, their own doing, and a lot of it not. So as you guys know, I like to cover the news and I like to give a little podcast blurb at the end. Those are the news elements that have come up. First of all, before we move on, hashtag ACG if you got this part. Please do so. If you get a chance, follow me on iTunes and Spotify. Please do so. Those really help the channel. I always like to talk a little bit more in discussion about titles, but I do want to mention that Valheim is on Steam. This is an early access survival Viking game. If you guys get a chance, check it out. I've played a couple hours of it. It didn't really grab me as much as everybody else. There's a lot of people who love this game. So far, with friends or alone, it hasn't really been a title where I'm like, I'm going to spend 1,000 hours in this. But I got to tell you right now, there's a reason why everybody's loving it. It may not hit with me perfectly, but it's hitting out there for other people. Check that out. Now, when it comes to the news that I've already discussed, let's talk a little bit more about the Nemesis system and Warner Brothers and what I meant when I stated in the news that this could actually blow into something that was larger. One of the things I want to make sure that people understand, as I stated before, is that there is really a platform that usually you associate with games, whether it be PlayStation or whether it be Sega or Nintendo and Microsoft. What we're having here, though, is this particular game mechanic that I do sort of see and consider to be a very high chance of finding in a lot of Warner Brothers games, where they do actually say with the patented Nemesis system. It does sell, guys. It is a situation where I wasn't incredibly impressed with the Nemesis system. In fact, I stated that on Twitter a couple days ago, and I was stunned to see a ton of people having the same problems I did with the Nemesis system. It almost never made sense to me. You had to basically ignore 20, 50, 60% of what was going on with the nemesis system for it to make any sense. You'd have people coming back from the dead, things just not making sense, characters that had interactions that you never had with them, even though you had just fought them a moment before and it never really explained why. But when it worked for somebody, it worked. And what it did was it added this slight feeling that the world engaged in things around you, that when you interacted with a character and returned, they might be stronger. Nothing wrong with that. It's something I absolutely love, and something we don't get in a lot of games. How many MMOs have we played where you go and the boss is always the same strength, everybody prepares for them, and they know exactly what they can do? Only with like a system like the Nemesis system can something like this be engaged, where you go into it, maybe you lose, you return, and they're stronger. I love that idea. Or you return and maybe you almost killed them, but you did a lot of piercing damage or something like that, and suddenly they're wearing some kind of plate mail, which they might not have worn prior. The reason why patenting these kind of systems is bad, though, and the reason why most people don't like the idea of it, is because when you patent this, a lot of times developers may be able to get away with doing their own system and changing it up. But a lot of developers will look at a patent like that and say, guess what, guys? I don't want to spend money defending our system, so we're not going to do so. That is the problem right there. And if you look at this patent, which I have done more than a dozen hours of study on this patent, other patents like it, understanding the words behind it, what they've done, piecing and tearing apart the Nemesis system, and actually talking to a couple people who've worked on it, I gotta say, the big issue here is it's so generic. It is a very generic patent, and it's a patent that I could see a lot of developers just saying, hey guys, I don't want to do it. And of course, we know why Warner Brothers wanted to patent it, not for the prior games. That really means nothing to them. But patenting it now, again, allows for them to say, only on our systems will you see this kind of stuff. And they can sell it any way they want, new and improved, with the tried and true Nemesis system or Nemesis System 2.0. It really does allow for them to get away with some stuff that I think a lot of gamers probably do not want them to get away with. And last, I just want to mention one more thing about Ratchet and Clank. Guys, this game looks awesome. Ratchet and Clank, the reason why I'm doing this now is because I don't want this to sound like this during the news. I'm excited for the game, though. Graphically, this thing looks off the hook. It looks completely unlike most other games. Now, funny enough, I'm not that interested in the instant traversal to another location. We haven't seen how it's going to work, and I could definitely see it being utterly confusing if you did it a ton of times in a single battle or something like that, where instead it was just done for some kind of hardware dick swinging. However, just the graphics, just the way it looks, the animation, what we're looking at here on these new consoles, these new systems, this engages me and makes me interested not only in Ratchet and Clank, but of course the new whatever and whenever we get it, but the new Fable or the new Rare game that might be coming out, those type of systems, or just watching and seeing what people who can handle cool animation and really detailed colored lighting and all those things can make. I mean, this is an HDR dream come true. If you are a fan of HDR, I would suggest you check it out. Looks friggin' fantastic, and it's not coming too far away, actually. Anyway, that's it for me. As always, iTunes, Spotify, you can use my affiliate links as well. So I've got an affiliate store on Amazon. I figured, you know what, that'll be me as my own sponsor. So if you guys get a chance, it's in the links. You can go there. If you buy something on Amazon, just as normal, it doesn't cost you any more, but it actually helps out the channel and continues to allow me to give you guys reviews and anything like this, news and so forth, without any BS or sponsors. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.